Have we met before? Possibly in Michigan.
Have you ever fallen asleep watching TV and woken up only to find something completely different on? Something strange? Something that feels almost like you shouldn't be watching it? Welcome back to the Horror Diner, where we serve up piping hot horror right to your table. I'm Spooky Pie, your waitress, your chef, and your new friend, who's going to sit down and talk about horror with you. If you're new to the Horror Diner, here we're going to talk about all forms of horror media. From books to movies to podcasts, TV shows, video games. If it's horror, it's fair game. But that's not all. We're going to cook up a little something that goes with that piece of media that we're talking about. Now, not everything features a dish in it or has a clear theme that translates easily to food, so some dishes might end up being a little bit more of a stretch than others. For our second venture into the Horror Diner, we're going to be talking about what is truly one of the most bizarre pieces of media I've ever come across. So, buckle up, y'all. So, real talk time. I've never been particularly good at sleeping. Even as a child, I stayed up way too late. By the time I was 14, this had grown into full-blown insomnia. This was a time where streaming services were really a thing, so when you were up really late, you were pretty much at the mercy of whatever cable TV had to show you. Mostly what I watched was Nick at Night, which is how I ended up with a lifelong obsession with MASH, and to a smaller extent, Cheers. But sometimes, if I'd seen an episode one too many times in the recent past, or my attention span was scattered, I would venture into the deep end of things like HBO, Showtime, or the International Film Channel. More than once, I would finally nod off while watching something innocuous like The Princess Bride, only to wake up to some late-night, independently produced movie that was definitely too mature for my early teen self. And I remember the understanding that I was being shown something strange and almost liminal, something I probably should never have seen.
I get the same feeling from Cecilia Condit's 1983 short film Possibly in Michigan. The age of the film and the upload quality to the director's own YouTube channel give it the feeling of something recorded off a VHS from another VHS from late-night cable that might be passed around your friend group. It's bizarre and dreamlike, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since I first watched it about half a year ago.
I cannot take full credit for stumbling into this work of art on my own. One of my favorite podcasts, Random Number Generator Horror Number 9, did an episode in which they talked about multiple short films. Give it a listen when you have the chance, I'll link it in the description. And Jeffrey Craner introduced this as his favorite thing he had ever watched for the show. See, I'm a Night Vale girly through and through, so when one of the writers gives a piece of media that glowing an introduction, I know I have to watch it. And then I did, and it was the strangest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. It's surreal and esoteric, and did I mention it's a musical? Yeah, with the exception of an omnipotent narrator almost giving a feeling of Into the Woods, all lines are sung, because hey, who doesn't love a surreal musical about murder and cannibalism? But before we get too into the weeds of this one, we can't have you going hungry. Let's head over to the kitchen and see what we've got for today's dish.
Coming up with a recipe that ties into the theme of cannibalism is actually kind of challenging when you're a vegetarian, which I am. So I couldn't make something meaty, which would have been the natural choice. So I scoured my very weird collection of cookbooks and found Kitchen Overlord's Dead Delicious Horror Cookbook, which had a recipe for red velvet cinnamon rolls. Looks gross, but also on theme, and I can actually eat it, so here we go. First, preheat your oven to 350 degrees and gather your ingredients for the dough. You'll need brown sugar, yeast, a box of red velvet cake mix, flour, kosher salt, red food coloring, vanilla extract, and 2.5 cups of water heated to between 105 and 110 degrees Fahrenheit. The temperature of the water is important in activating the yeast, so learn from my mistakes and get an actually good kitchen thermometer. And don't be an idiot like me, who just buys things because they're pink, not because they're good. I've already added 1 tablespoon of yeast and 1 tablespoon of brown sugar to a mixing bowl. You'll then add in your hot water and whisk until the yeast dissolves. Give it 10 minutes to fully activate. Once that is activated, add in 1 teaspoon kosher salt, 1 teaspoon vanilla extract, and half a teaspoon of red food coloring. Mix these all together. Then comes the cake mix. Add the entire box of cake mix to this mixture, as well as 5 cups of flour. Keep stirring until it begins to form dough. It's looking fun already! Now, for this next bit, you'll need a stand mixer with a hook attachment for dough. If you're smart, you'd have done this whole thing in the mixing bowl for the stand mixer, which would have saved me a lot of trouble, but also would have made it harder for you guys to see the ingredients. So let's just say I did this all for you guys and not that I lack foresight. Once you've got the mixer going, let it do its thing for 8 minutes or until the dough looks smooth. Form the dough into a ball and let it sit for 1 hour. And go do something fun for a bit while it's rising. I watched a video essay on Cronenberg's The Fly and Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis. It was neat! Punch the dough down and let it sit for 10 minutes. While it's sitting, prep your counter to roll out the dough. I'm using a pastry mat to keep things a little neater, but you can just clean your counter and spread the flour on that too. You don't need a pastry mat. It does help to have a familiar to supervise you while you do this. The diner's night manager, Salem, was kind enough to observe. Plop your dough on your floured surface and start rolling out your dough. If you find the dough sticking to your rolling pin, you can rub some flour on it. Roll the dough out until it's about 8 by 24 inches. With the dough rolled out, we can now make the filling. You will need butter, melted, but shown here whole for aesthetic purposes, cinnamon, dark brown sugar, and white sugar. In a clean bowl, add 1/2 cup melted but cooled down butter, 1 cup white sugar, 1 cup dark brown sugar, and finally 2 tablespoons of cinnamon. Mix all these ingredients together until they look, according to the recipe's wording, like gravel. Then spread the filling on top of your dough. Carefully roll the dough into a long tube. Go slowly and carefully. Once you have it in a nice tube, cut it into 2-inch portions. Go get your pans. You'll need a 9 by 13 main pan and a smaller 9-inch round. Make sure both of them are greased. Now, carefully unroll segments along the edges of the pan. Keep going, working your way in. These are supposed to look like guts, so shape them and give them the odd wrinkles and twists to make it look more authentic. Once you've got everything placed, give it an hour to rise. Once you've given them that time to rise, go ahead and pop them in the oven and let them bake for 24 to 28 minutes, depending on your oven. After they're done baking and the edges are slightly brown, take your guts out and set them aside to cool. Now we're going to make the glaze. You'll need melted butter, again shown here not melted for prettiness sake, powdered sugar, kosher salt, vanilla extract, and milk. In a clean bowl, add 4 tablespoons melted butter, 1 teaspoon vanilla extract, 2 to 3 tablespoons of milk, depending on how thick you want your glaze, a pinch of salt, and 2 to 2.5 cups of powdered sugar. Go ahead and mix all of that together. If while you're mixing, you're finding the glaze is way thicker than you wanted, go ahead and add milk in to thin it. Go ahead and do that until you have the consistency you desire. I wanted mine kind of runny. Now go get your guts. Spread your glaze on them using as much or as little as you want until the guts are covered. And with that, our gross anatomy experiment is ready to set up for a bit. We'll come back for this later, as long as Salem doesn't try to eat it first. Described by Caysea Stone in her 2025 essay on the film as if Lana Del Rey's 2011 homemade music videos, The Love Witch and I Saw the TV Glow had a baby,
Possibly in Michigan follows the dreamy musical adventures of Sharon and Janice, 2 good friends who are just trying to have a nice day out until a horrifying creep in an unsettling plastic mask decides to ruin it. Typical, really. Here I would usually say something like, but nothing is as it seems. But in the case of Possibly in Michigan, it's too strange to even attempt a prediction at where it's going. So I'll just say that Janice and Sharon are not the damsels that this fairy tale-like film would have you believe they are. What follows is an odd tale about 2 gals just being pals in a world where women are made to fear for their safety at the hands of violent men every day of their lives. From here on out, it's going to be spoilers while we talk about what actually happens in Possibly in Michigan. If you don't want to be spoiled because you haven't seen it, skip to the timestamp below to avoid the summary. But honestly, it's just a little over 11 minutes long,
and it's free on YouTube, so just go watch it and come back. I promise I'll still be here.
For everyone else, let's crack into it. We open on a young woman named Sharon exiting a mall elevator, followed by a man in a mask that I can only describe as simultaneously horrifying and perverted. Behind this opening number is the first instance of the film's theme song, Animal Cannibal, which is performed by Karen Skladani, who plays Janice. She meets up with her friend Janice, while the narration tells us that they are very alike, up to their bad taste in boys and their taste in perfume. We learn that the creepy mask guy is named Arthur, as he continues to follow the girls as they enter a department store. They seem unaware of him, but he can be seen behind them in basically every shot while they're in the department store, pretty close, and with his weird mask on. They bond over a perfume they both want that smells like Janice's mother's crazy sister Kate, who apparently accidentally blew herself up. But that's neither here nor there. On their way through the store to check out more perfume, shots of the girls walking are intercut with footage of buildings being demolished and collapsing. They locate the perfume they're looking for, and Sharon goes ahead to buy some for each of them while Janice waits outside. I know, you're wondering when the horror comes in. It's coming. Stay with me. We get more footage of Sharon and Janice walking through the mall, intercut with footage of Sharon lying covered in flowers, almost like John Everett Malay's Ophelia, and a masquerade ball where everyone has animal masks, which feels like a weird hybrid of Labyrinth and Eyes Wide Shut. Here, Animal Cannibal strikes back up. And while the accompanying visuals are just odd, the lyrics give us a look at the plot and what's to come.
How do I meet the strangest men? They always seem to find me. Remember that time way back when I kissed a guy who ate his women friends?
Janice finally spots Arthur following Sharon up an escalator and points him out. How they've missed a man in a horrifying mask following them all day, not even subtly, like literally right behind them, all the time, is beyond me, but our girls are at least now aware of the danger. They book it out of the mall into a waiting car, and while they escape, we get more of the masquerade ball, buildings collapsing, and Sharon as Ophelia footage. We also get our next bit of plot foreshadowing through the lyrics.
In some strange department store, we won't see him anymore. Who knows how some people turn to strange ones? Is it up to me to make them into dead ones? Here we go again.
We get more visuals of poodles, and then a fading picture of Sharon becoming what looks like a decomposing corpse. The girls pull up to Sharon's house, and Janice gives her what I'm sure is a very platonic kiss, and then heads off as Sharon walks up the lawn to her house, while Arthur once again is shown appearing behind each of them. Arthur rings Sharon's doorbell, and glimpsing him outside the window, Sharon immediately hides and calls Janice on the phone. We then see Janice, handgun in hand, shooting masked men that appear in her backyard. She picks up the phone, and while Sharon tells her that the strange man is in her house, we see Arthur pick up a rock from Sharon's yard that was covering the face of a decomposing corpse. If he sees the corpse, he doesn't react, and uses the rock to break a window to Sharon's house. Janice hauls ass out the door with her gun to go save Sharon, while Arthur manages to get his way inside the house. Arthur attacks Sharon and tells her she has the option to either allow him to eat her now or he'll dismember her and eat her later. When she asks, why? He responds, for love. To which she says, love shouldn't cost an arm and a leg. Meanwhile, we get shots of Janice making her way downtown, blasting masked men as she goes. Intercut with the footage of worms, presumably eating something that is decomposing, and close-ups of people eating meat. Janice makes it there, and shoots Arthur dead. Our background music then shifts keys to sound more optimistic, while Janice and Sharon get to work dealing with Arthur's body. They dismember him, and then we cut to Sharon stirring a pot of soup that we briefly see a man's face in, before she holds out a spoon for Janice to taste. We then see the girls toasting 2 glasses of wine with a platter of meat in front of them, completely naked. It cuts to them, still naked, sitting pressed shoulder to shoulder, smoking cigarettes. At some point, they put their clothes back on and bag up what's left of Arthur in trash bags. The last shot in the movie we see is the trash bags being thrown into the back of a garbage truck and compacted, while Sharon and Janice watch out the window of Sharon's house with matching blank expressions. Now, while I don't want to dwell on it, I do want to get this out. Both possibly in Michigan and Cecilia Condit's first film, Beneath the Skin, were, by her own admission, created as a means of therapy. Cecilia Condit's life was touched by a real-life crime that she used her art to process. But I don't want to focus on this and have the crime overshadow her art. I want to strictly discuss the art itself and celebrate her and not her crime. So we won't be discussing that in any detail here. If you're interested in learning about that, Wendy Vogel wrote a pretty in-depth piece on the inspiration for possibly Michigan and Beneath the Skin. It has since been taken down, but I was able to dig it up on the Wayback Machine, and I'll link it in the description. That aside, there are a few angles that I want to examine possibly in Michigan, making this video way longer than its source material, but here we are. The first is interpreting the film as a fairy tale, or at the very least, a part of folklore. As Stephen Broomer had to say on the podcast Art Trash,
Condit's reorientation of power and violence into the hands of women is, in itself, a repudiation of the fairy tale structure in which beasts almost inevitably stalk young and beautiful bodies. Further to this, even if they are to be taken as princesses, Sharon and Janice are so far from the naive objecthood of their fairy tale counterparts that they may also be something else. Just as a man can be both woodsman and wolf, both frog and prince, a woman can be both princess and witch.
So under that point, the first way I want to talk about the text is in how it likens Sharon and Janice to monsters. And I say that in the best way possible. Monster doesn't mean bad, but there is a history of monster women I believe they slot into rather nicely. I first thought this based on both Condit's decision to use the format of a musical and the reveal that this isn't the first time Sharon and Janice have had to dispose of a man. As I quoted earlier, the theme song mentions having to make men into dead ones, followed by "Here we go again," implying that this has happened before, which is just furthered when we see the reveal of the dead body buried in Sharon's yard and the efficiency with which the women dispose of Arthur's body.
My first thought in regard to this was that Sharon and Janice were, in a way, sirens. 2 beautiful women singing, luring a man to his death with their beautiful song about perfume and poodles in microwaves.
But after all, as noted by Barbara Creed,
the sirens of classical mythology used their magical songs to lure sailors close to the shore in order to drive the sailors' ships into hidden reefs. The sirens then ate their helpless victims.
Which definitely checks boxes here, because that does, in some ways, seem to follow the girl's journey to a point. Although it's not a perfect analog, since this paints Arthur as an innocent dum-dum called to his death by Girl Pretty. And even if he is dealt with handily, he is a threat, and he is still the villain of the piece. Which leads to my next example. While I don't know if I can claim this next one as folklore, it is about a monster woman. When the introduction of the film states,
Sharon attracted violent men. Strangely, she had a way of making the violence seem like it was their idea.
On my first watch, this part really rubbed me the wrong way. Not having seen it before, it felt somewhat victim-blaming to me to have that line in there, especially since this is accompanied by a scene that is literally just Sharon riding an escalator in an empty mall. It also reminded me, in a way, of Junji Ito's somewhat problematic work, Tomie. Tomie, for those unfamiliar, is a manga series about Tomie Kawakami. Tomie is so beautiful and so alluring that she has a supernatural effect on the people around her. They become completely obsessed with her to the point where they want to destroy her, and ultimately they destroy themselves. In this series, no matter how many times Tomie is killed, and a few different times dismembered or eaten, much like Arthur had planned for Sharon, she always comes back. The obsessive douche who did her in, again, much like Arthur, however, stays very, very dead. Tomie and Janice are both beautiful monster women who triumph over the human monsters who want to destroy them, which, some of the more problematic elements of that manga aside, is an idea I really love. Not to get too sidetracked about Tomie and Junji Ito in a video about an American horror short, but if you're curious, another YouTuber named Grimelle did a great and exhaustive essay on the series called Tomie Did Nothing Wrong, which I highly recommend and will link in the description. Moving on, the second large tie to folklore, and possibly in Michigan, is how it mirrors and plays with the Little Red Riding Hood as a touchstone. Arthur changes his mask to a wolf mask in the final act.
And when he breaks into Sharon's house, even utters the line, "The better to eat you with, my dear." Red Riding Hood is well known for containing cannibalism, depending on what version you're reading. Not every version ends with Grandma and Red rescued by a woodsman. Some they bleakly are both killed and that's the end, and in some Red is tricked into eating her grandmother by the wolf.
The wolf himself, in many adaptations, is an analogy for a sexual predator, much like Arthur himself. Bringing up Into the Woods again, another musical that I could argue contains horror elements in its own fashion, the wolf's interest in Red is predatory
in a way that doesn't just imply he wants food. The wolf's number, Hello Little Girl, is a song that is a thinly veiled seduction, confirmed by the song Red sings after being rescued by the baker called I Know Things Now, where she sings, "But he seems so nice, and he showed me things, many beautiful things that I hadn't thought to explore."
Arthur also mirrors the Into the Woods version of the wolf, in that when he first arrives at Sharon's house, he is maskless and human, appearing to be nice. But he becomes a wolf once she opens the door to him. This also gives us a good misdirect, making us think that it's going to follow a traditional fairy tale. Sharon is Little Red, and therefore we are meant to think she is meek and passive in the face of the wolf, and that these girls are meant to be seen as damsels. But if Arthur is the wolf and Sharon is Little Red, then the woodsman is Janice. She swoops in to rescue Sharon and dispatches Arthur so quickly it's almost comical, which actually segues nicely into the second big angle I want to talk about, which is romance. Because, come on, Sharon and Janice are in love, right? Don't answer that. They are. But if you're skeptical and want to come at me with a, "God, can't girls ever just be friends?" Look, I have receipts. Here they are. Point number 1. In the first act, Sharon and Janice are shopping. Sharon buys perfume for Janice. Perfume has long been considered a romantic gift, and a pretty traditional gift for giving to a romantic partner. Yes, I have bought and have been given perfume by other women who are just friends, but there is a history of this having meaning. I mean, come on, in the 1992 Barbie Dream Date board game, you, as Ken, need to pick up gifts, one of which is perfume, before Barbie will even go on a date with you. So, just saying. Point number 2. When Janice drops Sharon off at her house, she kisses her in a way that, to me, does not look entirely platonic. And yes, I know it's not unheard of for platonic friends to kiss, but the last platonic friend I had that I was in the habit of kissing casually, I ended up marrying, so I rest my case on that one. Point number 3. After Arthur has been dispatched, the dinner that Sharon and Janice make out of him is very cute and intimate, with Sharon having Janice taste the soup she's making from him and both of them giggling. Cooking together has long been regarded as a type of intimacy, and they both look to be taking a genuine joy in both the act and each other's company. Considering they are cooking a man that they just killed, it's very cozy and downright domestic. Point number 4. My last and biggest point in my argument is that post-meal, both girls are seen naked, leaning against each other and smoking. While I'm sure someone can come up with a heterosexual explanation for this, I can't think of one. And it's not like cinema shorthand for two people having just gotten down hasn't long been to just show them with no clothes on smoking. So, Sharon and Janice are in love. The kind of love where you don't hesitate to kill for each other. Potentially, over and over and over again, if the bodies in the yard are any indication. I'd say Happy Pride Month, but I didn't get the script done quickly enough for that to be true, so instead, yay gals being pals.
Doing just girly things like kissing and eating people.
Which wraps up what I have to say about Possibly Michigan. And that should have given us enough time that our dish should be cool enough to eat. So let's head back out into the diner and grab a bite.
Wow, she might look gross, but she tastes great. What do you guys think? Would you give this a shot? Have you watched Possibly in Michigan? Drop your thoughts on the film, the food, and what your favorite piece of weird found media is in the comments below. Recipes, recommendations, and citations are all listed in the description. And hey, if you enjoyed your stay here, maybe you think about liking and subscribing to see what we cook up next. And if you want to go even further, we've got a Patreon now. A lot goes on in front of and behind the camera to make these videos, and every little bit helps us keep the lights on in the diner and the gas on in the stoves. You can find that linked in the description as well as links to where you can find us at on Instagram and Bluesky. This has been Possibly in Michigan. I've been Spooky Pie, and you've been amazing. Y'all come back now, you hear?
Wouldn't that be nice? I think so.
I just realized how far away my fucking microphone is. Oh my god.
Why will none of you cats come sit with me? Salem!
They bond over a perfume they bought. You're just his butt.
Salem. We dismember him, and then we catch a
I'm trying to eat my food. Dale. You can't see. Oh, you can see him. Salem. No cake.